Hello, folks. I hope everybody's enjoying the start of their Canada Day long weekend, and Canada Day is tomorrow. Even though I got to work, I hope I could go out afterwards. But I'm going to do a video on Canadian politics today, trying to keep it brief and to the point, and just some of my thoughts on the kind of the pandemic overall and what I think could be done, even though it might be hard to do so. I mean, I've mentioned this before in some other videos, but maybe some people have never heard my thoughts on it completely. So let's dive into it. Basically, the vaccine requirements and whatever and the restrictions have been changed for now, but there's still some stuff in place. So, from my understanding, if you're unvaccinated, you still have to provide a negative COVID test to travel outside of the country, and you have to come back and quarantine for 2 weeks. And then any traveler who wants to come to Canada has to be fully vaccinated still. I mean, it's just becoming very excessive at this point as well. This is bad for the economy because you're going to still not have Canadians want to go travel to the US or other places, which affects their economy. Then, frankly, it's going to be a bit of a turnoff for some travelers for sure from other countries. They're just going to pick somewhere else to go. So, economically speaking, it doesn't really help the situation. And considering how much turmoil the economy is already in with rising inflation, we hit a high with inflation hasn't been this high basically since the 1970s, speaking, which is very interesting. But, the government's going to keep doing this as long as they have the power to keep doing it. It's just, the government likes to control people. And once they kind of get the power, it's hard for them to completely get rid of it at the end of the day. I'm not saying it can't happen, but yeah, the government loves power and the government loves taking people's freedom away a lot, to be honest with you, especially in more recent times. But basically, what I would do is amend the Constitution, which I'm going to get into why this is hard. I would amend the Constitution basically to push the power down, like more from the bottom up to the top down, but I'm pretty sure you'd have to have something like a referendum to achieve such a thing, or you'd have to amend the Constitution because the power or the powers are incorporated into the Constitution. So you'd have to amend that to basically push the government down to become smaller. And I would give municipal governments and even provincial governments more power, and then hopefully the federal government would actually have the least amount of power. That would be ideal. But what else I would do is I would also get rid of Section 33 of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause. I mean, it restricts certain limits for a certain amount of time, such as freedom of assembly and etc. But if freedom of assembly, we've really seen be harmed a lot, over the last 2 years with this pandemic or so-called pandemic. And then what I would do is strictly modify Section 1 of the Charter and the reasonable limits clause. So typically, you have the Oakes test, and then the reasonable limits clause is basically three things. Is there a rational connection between the limit and the objective? I mean, for the first while of this pandemic, yes, there was. If I were looking at the Oakes test in court here as a judge or whatever, I'd be like, yes, there is a rational connection. But at this point, I really don't think there is anymore. And the second thing they would look at is, the rights being limited in the least restrictive way, which, this could have been done in a lot less of a restrictive way than the way they handled it for sure. I mean, yeah, it could have been done a lot better on that front. And the third thing is, does the collective cost outweigh the individual cost? And I would say really in the end here, it really hasn't. I mean, sure, some people died, but the majority of the population in the collective overall did not die from this. It's 1% of the population, basically people over the age of 70. And you know what? It's grandma and grandpa's lives matter, but you're just ruining the economy and ruining people's lives of younger generations that are going to be around for a lot longer. It doesn't make much sense to sacrifice that over the latter as well. And, this has had a lot of effects on the individual as well. I mean, people lost their jobs, people, drug use has gone up because of the pandemic over the last couple of years, opioid deaths and whatever. Some people did die from the vaccine. I'm not saying it's everybody, but some people did die, and some people have they might still be alive, but they're kind of got a condition, like they might talk with a murmur or something, or like Randy Hunt syndrome was even mentioned as well, which is actually what Bieber got, which is quite interesting. And, just economically overall, now we're starting to see the inflation more, which is mainly due to the lockdowns. I mean, there's going to become more to do with the war eventually here, and that's having some impact. But basically, our economy is going into turmoil because they printed all this money and they pumped the money into the money supply, and then that just increases inflation. And now, since people aren't locked down and they're going out and spending that money again, basically, that money's starting to circulate through the economy now, and now inflation's starting to go up. You're starting to see more. But yeah, ideally, that's what, like, just I'm going off on different things, but that's some of the things I would do um, to limit their power, take away the government's power from like ever initiating this kind of stuff again. But then with the 750 rule, it's pretty much kind of impossible to amend the Constitution because 7 provinces would have to agree to it. And within those 7 provinces, it would have to represent 50% of the population. And the federal government would have to agree to it. So it's probably never going to happen with amending it. But that's the only like lawful and peaceful way I could see of doing it as well. Yeah, I haven't talked in a little bit here and I'm a little tired. So hopefully you guys get the gist of it. Peace.